Psalmist says, I called on the Lord answered me. And then he says that the Lord set him free.
Yes.
Put him in a large space rather than a tight one.
That's right.
Because he was in a tight space.
That's right.
When you're in distress, you feel like everything is just tight.
Yes.
You ever heard, you feel like you're between a rock and a hard place.
Yes.
Just in a tight space.
Yes.
But what the Lord does was set him free and place him in a large space. So not only does the psalmist activate his freedom to call on the Lord, but he's actually freed by the Lord.
Yes.
Bondage is a real thing. Bondage can be so very strong, so serious. And I wonder when reading this text if the psalmist was in bondage due to fear. Because he brings that up. He says, the Lord is on my side. He says, I will not fear.
I will not fear.
It made me wonder if he feared before.
That's right. That's right.
It made me wonder if he was in bondage because of fear.
Yes.
You know, fear is really something, and sometimes human beings are bothered by even the threat of violence.
That's right.
Not actual violence happening, but the threat of violence. The possibility that something bad could happen.
That's right.
And so then we find ourselves living in fear. And what that does is it keeps us in bondage.
That's right.
We're afraid of everything.
Yes.
Howard Thurman, the great author and activist, civil rights activist and theologian, he talks about the threat of violence. He talks about that, the threat of violence. He talks about an experience that he had where there was a dog in his neighborhood that would come down the street. This dog would bark. They would hear the dog barking. But what would happen is when the dog would see the little boys move their hand in this motion, their arm in this motion. Now the little boys didn't actually have a rock in their hand. But because of the motion, we're talking about the threat of violence. Because of the motion, the dog would be afraid. So the dog was afraid because of something that obviously had happened to him in the past.
That's right.
But it wasn't happening to him right now. But the threat of violence can cause fear. Fear is not really something that we ought to be feeling in the first place because God has not given us a spirit of fear. Yet and still we need to be freed from fear because sometimes because of some things that have happened in the past.
That's right. That's right.
Just like that little dog. Because of some things that have happened in the past. I'm afraid. So God, I need you to free me from my fear of my past. Because you see, I'm living in a time where past behavior is a good predictor of future behavior. So because I dealt with this situation in the past, I can't move forward to my future because I can't get that off my mind. But what God is trying to do is to free us from those things that will have us back. You're not a slave anymore. So now you don't have these shackles on your wrist and on your ankles, but they're on your mind. And what God is trying to do is to free us, to liberate us.